Welcome, everyone. I want to give the floor to Isabel Rambu, who's Deputy Director of IGF.
Thank you, Marina. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. On behalf of the IGF, I would like to welcome you to the second session of the third Mining and Sustainability Forum of the Americas, which we are very pleased to once again co-organize with the Inter-American Development Bank. We have Martin Walter with us today and CAMMA, represented by Roberto Sarudiansky. The theme of this year's forum, as you know, is critical mineral supply chains. Our first event was held on Tuesday, 27th of July. We discussed the state of play on the issue of supply chains in the Americas. It was a very important and fruitful session where you shared your thoughts and on where we stand as a region in terms of critical minerals and where we want to be moving forward regarding supply chains. The purpose of our second session today is to gather your insights once again, and this time discuss concrete proposals that will be presented to the ministers at the CAMMA meeting later this year. The proposals are aimed at having a regional approach to advance supply chains of critical minerals. This issue is of paramount importance given the rising demand for minerals such as lithium and copper, all needed for the low carbon transition. The Americas are particularly well endowed with such minerals and have many more, and therefore have a key role to play as global suppliers. In doing so, it is also very important not to miss opportunities to leverage those minerals for the region's own development trajectory. And in that regard, it is important to have a clear strategy on how and where to position countries individually and the region as a whole along the supply chain. With those few words, I would like to hand over the floor to Madam the Moderator, Carolina Rojas-Hayes, former Vice Minister of Mines of Colombia.
Thanks, Isabel, and thanks to IGF and BID and IDB and CAMMA for inviting me to moderate this important panel. And welcome everyone to this discussion. First of all, I want to tell you a bit about our methodology. Today, Amir Lebdioui is going to show you some proposals to advance in this important subject of critical minerals in the region. Each proposal is going to be followed by a survey, which we're going to show or send to all of you, and subsequently our guests, who I'm going to present or introduce, are going to show each of these proposals. As what Marina said, or also in the Q&A, there's an open question which we'd like to invite you all to be answering throughout the event. The question is, what are the key obstacles for the development of regional supply chains and for the proposed policy projects nowadays? So this question is going to be available in the Q&A, and I would like to invite you to answer to this question. And of course, if you have questions for Amir or for any of the panelists, please let us know in the Q&A, and we'll see how we can integrate them in the discussion. So we're going to go to introduce the panelists, very important. We'd like to start with Elizabeth Bastida. She is a professor of Dundee University in the United Kingdom, and we've invited Elizabeth in this panel because of her academic experience as an international lawyer in subjects of extractive resources. We also have Amir Lebdioui, who you already know. He's a researcher of the Latin America and the Caribbean Center from the London School of Economics, and he's making these proposals today. We also have the participation of Fernando Lucchini. He is the CEO, the executive president of the Alta Corporation in Chile, which is a very interesting cross-sectorial center in the Chilean mining industry, and he's going to share with us his view from innovation in the sector. We also have Janet Sanchez. Janet is chief of the Natural Resources Division in the LACC, and the LACC is a very important body, as you know, in the region. And besides in this direction, very important research has been made in regards to critical minerals in the region. Finally, we'll have Christian Spano. He is a senior executive in climate change and circular economy in the private sector. And he precisely is coming to share with us his view from the private sector in regards to minerals for the low carbon transition in the world. So we will start our session with the remarks of Janet Sanchez, who's going to show with us the inside of LACC in this subject, and then we'll go with Amir, who will be doing the introduction or presentation of the first proposal. So, Janet, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Carolina. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks to the organizers, to IDF, to IDB and CAMMA for this nice and kind invitation. Coming up, I'm going to share very quickly a presentation. Okay, you can see it. First of all, we are going to see, or let me see if it goes to the next one. Okay, right, there we go. First of all, what is the context? There is a global demand of critical minerals, which will substantially increase due to the power transition, to the electric transition and electromobility, powered especially by developing or emerging countries, China, Japan, the Dominican Republic, Europe, and um, North America. It's estimated that, according to research that we have in ECLAC, that there is a projection of a yearly demand of refined copper of 1.5% since 2019 up to 2030, and of lithium in around 16.4% between 2019 and 2030. Mainly, the demand is originated in China and Asia, and especially in the case of lithium, it's driven by the increase or by the demand for batteries and electric vehicles, electric cars. In the case of copper, of course, the demand is way more varied, but at least a 10% also comes from the demand of electrical cars or vehicles. The region, besides, has high levels of reserves and production. Here we are at an auditorium of experts, and there's not much to say. You all know, in regards to reserves as well as production, the region has a giant potential, even though it has been losing reserves throughout this millennium between 2000 and 2020, relatively in regards to lithium as well as in copper, but we're still main stakeholders or players in the production of copper and lithium, which is mainly where I'm going to focus in this presentation. On the other hand, the region is concentrated especially in the lower part of a chain, especially in mining. In the bars that we can see on screen, physically it's the first bar, right? This first section where there is especially Chile and Argentina. Chile is in green and Argentina is in blue. Australia is in red. And in the rest, for the refining for electrical and chemical cells and assembling of batteries, we already have an important presence, especially of China, Japan, South Korea, and in a lesser extent, the United States. In this context, and with the potential that we have, it is essential to strategically think on the opportunities and challenges of global value chains. Let's start with lithium. We have observed some weaknesses or some challenges and opportunities in this value chain. On the hand of the short-term weaknesses, especially we can observe a lagging in regards to the world in what has to do with regulations, incentives, and infrastructure in general. There is also a heterogeneity of techno-productive policies and absence of coordination in the lithium triangle. There is there's an absence of consideration in the environmental harms or issues that are of conflict, which is latent in this type of exploitation. There are also obstacles for the downstream advance, which are of the technical productive arena, governance, market, resources, and there are also long-term risks that we need to take into account as batteries recycling, as new reservoirs, new global lithium deposits, and new battery technologies that could emerge. Now, in terms of opportunities upstream, we can observe a margin. We have a margin to increase production. We also have margin to improve quality and price, margin to improve efficiency in the use of water and power, and to improve and incorporate technologies for production of carbonate and lithium hydroxide. There are opportunities also for a regional integration, for developing a regional market of electromobility and renewable energies or power. This is key. We have countries with market and scale and install capacity, which may allow or can allow this possibility with the production of vehicles. And there's also the possibility of a scientific cooperation. We have an important network of universities, of research centers. It is possible to achieve a cooperation at these levels. We could project the governance of the resource in a better way with agreements and with more shared policies, and we could influence in a better way in the price of lithium compounds. Now, on the other hand, and now thinking on the challenges and opportunities upstream for the manufacturing of active materials or precursors or active cathodes, it is required at least the capacity to produce refined materials of a battery degree. So we need to work in inputs, right? And with the appropriate requirements of cobalt, of magnesium, of nickel for the manufacturing of cells and battery packs, it is required to have a critical market of electric vehicles. Therefore, the role of the state is important to support in the development of these markets that we need and to promote, for instance, public transportation of electric vehicles in Latin America and the Caribbean. And some cities already at a municipality level have already started to have the first entrance, the first commencement with electric vehicles for public transportation. It is also required that the state implements incentives for investment in chains and also to drive the development of the lithium batteries market and electric vehicles. It is required that PPPs, public-private partnerships, are promoted for access to technologies and infrastructure for charging batteries, for instance. And it is required to promote the regional integration to strengthen the regional supply chains, critical masses, as for instance, the factory of batteries, the demand of electric vehicles, to provoke synergies in knowledge, capacities, and technologies. Now, in regards to copper, on the one hand, we see challenges. We have lost scientific and technological capacities to melting for the refining, especially for the case of Peru and Chile, who had scientific and technological capacities. There is a growth of this smelting and refining capacity in Asia, which actually grant that region a higher capacity to set fees, rates, and contracts. Therefore, Latin America and the Caribbean have lost the negotiating capacity or power. And it is necessary to face this, and there is a lot of opportunities for the management, recycling, and the use of waste for these processes. But we also have opportunities to develop technologies that can sustainably process complex copper concentrates using less energy, less water, and territory through the integration of the academic sector and the technological sector. It is very important investment in scientific research and technological development. And we also have the chance of provoking a carbon footprint when refining in a cheaper way. We do it in the region compared to Asia. Concentrate transport has a carbon footprint of 65% higher than, sorry, 45% higher than the transport of cathodes. And finally, there's the opportunity of having a more active state, which has an essential role as enabler and promoter of strategic investment required for the development at a national level and for the development of the environment and the necessary general ecosystem to promote these kinds of minerals and especially to densify and to strengthen the value chain. Having said this, thank you very much. Those are just some criteria so that we can have the debate and the comments next or coming up.
Gracias, Janet, por tu
Thanks,
interesante presentación.
Janet, for your interesting presentation, which actually sets a frame for the discussion that we're going to have in regards to Amir's proposal. So Amir, welcome. I want to give you the floor so that you can explain to us the first proposal.
Great. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this forum to propose policy projects on an issue that is extremely important for the economic future of the region. And thanks for the discussants who are agreed to be here today to discuss and provide key comments for the proposal and for the audience who will have a chance to participate and voice their opinion. So as Jeanette made it very clear, there are very important opportunities as well as obstacles in order to develop an industrial ecosystem around the extraction of critical minerals in the Americas. For those who were here in the previous session, we discussed why is it so imperative as an agenda, but I'll just briefly mention and add to what Janet said in terms of why regionalizing the supply chains around critical minerals is so important today in the context of the Americas. So those critical minerals are essential inputs for a range of strategic industries and low carbon technologies. And the Americas have an incredible opportunity because they feature both large deposits of a range of those critical minerals, but also the existence of downstream industries that could use those inputs, these minerals as inputs. And thinking regionally as opposed to nationally has great benefits. First, because of economy of scale, right? For most of the countries in the region, to reach competitiveness and productivity gains will require reaching large, basically economies of scale, which would require regional coordination. A regional supply chain will help reduce shocks, will help reduce vulnerability to external shocks, right? Especially when you depend on a single supplying countries. And most importantly, this is a great opportunity for green industrial diversification in the region, which is necessary to overcome commodity dependence, but also vulnerability to climate change due to the existing limitations of productive structures. And as Janet mentioned, to reduce carbon emissions, right? The trade of goods and services represent very large share of global carbon emissions, and thinking about regionalizing trade is also an opportunity to reduce shipping related emissions. So in that context, the main objective that we have today and through this project is to propose key policy projects to boost regional cooperation in the critical mineral sectors and to strengthen the regional supply chains related to those minerals. So we are in the phase of the project, the second phase. So after defining the imperatives, today we're identifying the key potential projects. And this idea is that in a couple of months, this will be presented in the annual CAMMA meeting to be adopted by the governments of the Americas. So now let me provide the overview. Sorry, the overview of the key policy projects. So they're divided across 4 different pillars. So we'll discuss each of the pillars separately. The first pillar is to establish a roadmap, right? And this is critical to get a common understanding and a common vision of how to develop critical minerals and their supply chains. The second pillar will be to boost regional cooperation to match existing supply and demand, right? And to overcome the coordination failures that prevent this from happening. The third pillar is to boost the acquisition of new productive capabilities and R&D in particular through capacity building. And the last pillar is the generation of data, right, which is essential to informing smart policies nationally and regionally. So both through an immediate analysis and identifying areas for future investigation. Let me start with the first one and we'll open up for discussion. So establishing a clear roadmap. The key objectives of this roadmap will be to make sure that amongst the countries of the region, the development of critical minerals is a policy priority. The objective is as well to coordinate the development of critical minerals and their production, as well as the value addition, both upstream and downstream. And lastly, to get a common understanding across the governments of the region of what the term critical minerals actually means, right? What minerals are included and which ones are not. And to achieve those objectives, the projects that we propose, the first one is a political declaration to be signed by all the governments of the region that provides a justification as to why critical mineral development needs to be prioritized today. The second key proposal is for ministers of mining to work together to evaluate the regional potential for the value addition around critical minerals, to share existing knowledge and data, and to commit to filling the knowledge gaps around that sector. The third one is to coordinate national initiatives amongst one another to develop those minerals and value addition capacity. And to achieve those objectives, we propose the creation of a working group within CAMMA to develop and follow up on this roadmap, as well as on the objectives in pillar 2, 3, and 4, which I will be presenting after the initial discussion.
Thank you, Amir. The first proposal is the definition of the roadmap route. The first thing we're going to do is a poll with everyone there. The question is, which should be the priority in the roadmap? 2 decisions: facing the knowledge gap regarding critical minerals in the region. Second, developing the common understanding in the critical minerals and meteorology or methodology to identify them, and increasing or implementing regional providers or suppliers to provide the offer and demand, fostering regional collaboration to encourage regional procurement to match supply and demand. We have for the first question, facing the gap of knowledge and regarding availability, that's 17%. The biggest one was developing a common understanding of what the critical minerals are and the methodology to identify them. And secondly, we have fostering regional collaboration to encourage regional procurement. We have a consensus regarding starting from the basics, defining which the critical minerals are. With these answers and what Amir presented, let's go to the panel. Let's have each one a short answer of 2 to 3 minutes. And let me start with Anna Elizabeth. From your point of view, the Academy, how do you see this proposal of the roadmap and what reactions do you have to it? Thank you. And thanks to your invitation to sum up to this debate in the region, I want to celebrate, first of all, the initiative of incorporating these topics of critical and strategic minerals within the CAMMA agenda. I think it's a recognition to the fact that mining is the first link in the productive chain and that we have multiple opportunities towards a future progressing in the value chain. And I think it's also a first step to imagine the future of mining within the region anchored in the economy of knowledge. With regards to this proposal, this first aspect of the proposal regarding the justification of looking for critical minerals, a political declaration, I think it's important to articulate it with the sustainability agenda, with all the international agreements in environment and human rights, all the treaties, the economic treaties in trade, in investments, and the rights to intellectual property. I would also like to say that there are two important topics, at least, to articulate within these prioritization exercise. Firstly, thinking of positioning the region with a competitive advantage, thinking of sustainability as a factor of competitiveness. I think it's important within the markets. It's a claim on behalf of societies. It comes from the constitutional frameworks of all the countries, all of state of law within the region. As well, thinking of the role of the state, it's the orchestration role in the stimulation of the linking of productive frameworks through collaboration. We will talk about it. Probably it's necessary to strengthen capabilities of formulation of operational consensus. Thank you, Anna Elizabeth. Very important topic and posture regarding policies and sustainability. I would like to give the floor to Fernando. Please react to this first proposal. Thank you, Carolina. Yes, thank you for your Amir, for your presentation and for all the organizations arranging this seminary. Thank you for giving this passionate meeting. As a representative of high law in this institution, which is the articulator of the ecosystem of innovation and technology of mining in Chile, we applaud initiatives like these. First of all, I want to tell you that we have to make progress in institutionality for these plans to become a reality. It doesn't only mean improve within the institutions, but if it's necessary and we want to make a reality for this Americanly, not Latin Americanly only, we want to make this into documents which show the consensus within the region. It's a great initiative, and agreeing on what we have said and summing to what Anna Elizabeth has said, I would like to make some kind of support within the paradigms of Chile. I think this roadmap from the beginning has to be in charge of the financing and investment of initiatives to make them into reality. We have coined a term. The institution of government is focused on financing and organizing. This has to be a dynamic consistency. That is the term. There is an ecosystem, privately and publicly, in the industry and the government, so this becomes a reality. We won't see the results in 2 years. We'll see them in 10 and 15, but from the beginning, we have to define how to finance, invest, and how to make the legal framework. Now, the second stress I want to put is that when we impose this investment from the public goods, we need to coordinate and monitor the whole ecosystem to become a reality. Many times we make the mistake, and as an ecosystem, we want to run before learning to walk. What we cannot measure, we cannot improve in. So I make a call, a concise call, to invest in public goods, so this can become a reality, an efficient reality. Most of the goods are observatory organizations, but also geoscientific information we need. We're talking about the repository of public-private data, the acts regarding data, all the public goods in the observation of the ecosystem, and the evolution of the improvements in green mining, so we can make this into a sustainable development. Thank you, Fernando. Two very important points you have put or posed on the table. First, financing, and secondly, public goods, taking data as a public good. Let me give the floor to Janet from CEPAL. How do you see this roadmap proposal, and with the comments on behalf of the public and from the other panel members? First of all, I want to say that I totally agree regarding the prioritization. It is key to know what we're talking about. First thing first. So what we have incorporated, on behalf of the colleagues that preceded me, what I would like to say to complement what we have said is the relevance, which is also a public good, of technology and research in science and technology for the different stages. The possibility of analyzing the geological potential in the exploitation, how to do it more efficiently, in environmental terms, how to make an appropriate optimal use of water, of energy, regarding the emissions of mining, as well as for the usage of marine water in the extraction of water, for the production of carbonate of lithium and lithium hydroxide from carbonates in the various possibilities we have in the incorporation of technologies of investigation to consider our specificities as countries. This institutional capital regarding investigation centers, and that the state might act or provide coordination, facilitation, what in the context of this roadmap, we should set stages for technological investigations, innovation, to create a group, to make a group of institutions of investigations and institutions, as well as universities regarding these mineral topics. I agree with Elizabeth with the concepts of sustainability and the importance of applying circular economy. It is important to have a traceability of critical minerals so we can establish the niche prices and the premium prices we want to forcefully be as a region because of the social and environmental issues we have. If we want to make them be a priority, the development has to be in the most appropriate way. I would stay there with my opinions. Thank you, Janet. You're touching on 2 or 3 important points. The first one, that these political manifestations have to do with science and technology, which are very important. Secondly, that there should be coordination instances and the traceability and in the initiatives. Let me give the floor to Christian regarding your reactions, that you might have reactions on this topic. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Amir. Well, I have very little to add because I totally agree with what my colleagues have said. But I would just like to set forth a couple of thoughts or questions. When you think of investing as a company, you wonder, why am I going to do it in Latin America? Well, maybe because I already have operations in Latin America and I just want to expand, but also because we have quality, low costs, and abundance in Latin America. So there are different dimensions where Latin America is a fantastic niche with a number of resources like coal and copper and lithium and iron. When you make a roadmap, you think about the vision regarding the mining sector. How can we have a reachable goal, not a dream, but that you can have the civilian society and the region as a whole to aspire and to see it as an absolute need? How do you make a vision that might motivate a positive goal for the whole? It's a big meeting. It's a regional goal.
Really
And that is
coming
what
back to
we
the
have to
context,
work.
nowadays, if we see the mining sector has been advancing and innovating in a fantastic way. It has been really embracing a set of different elements that are positive speed in climate change, sustainability. And if we see the destination markets, we see the commitments to net zero to 2030 to 2050. So it's an amazing commitment. But what I want to leave as my contribution is Latin America has a huge potential in the mining sector. It has the players, the institutions from the private sector, all the powerful ones. But one must think on what the conditions are that could give you or could give us a special competitiveness. What are those dimensions that are going to give us an access in the market or access to a market that are going to position us in a more robust way with lower risk? Just to name three, green hydrogen is based a lot in the generation of renewable electricity. When we see those countries with a higher potential, Chile, Brazil, Peru, seem like fantastic promises. And the mining sector that's going to grow and that's going to have a lot of investment could require a lot of green hydrogen. Likewise, the climate-based solutions is something that should be performed a lot, and the potential in Latin America is huge, and it could be offset and climate-based solutions of high quality. But for that, we need to respond to what Janet was saying. What is the traceability? How we're going to make this to be certified and of high quality and recognition. And if we're thinking, in a community, the experience with communities in Latin America is huge, and we can build upon that a lot. So if we see this vision, and I just want to wrap up by this, we see a Latin America that's not only giving access to huge quality of resources, but also to a quantity of resources that are coming with traceability, with a carbon offsets of high quality, with better improvements in transport of green hydrogen as an industry. And if we think of that, a generation of employment and sustainable employment, not for the next 10 years, but for the next 20 years, that becomes something that goes beyond the mining sector. And then the mining sector becomes a center for a fantastic transformation. So I think there's an opportunity that we should seize a lot. I want to leave it like that. Thanks, Christian. Your intervention was very interesting, especially in highlighting the importance of a shared vision of this agenda, in the sense in which it's not just left in the mining sector, but that it is a contribution beyond it. And the other subject that Elizabeth mentioned and that you highlighted also is how we can become a competitive region from the point of view of sustainability and the point of view of good practices related to this sustainable extraction or with good practices of critical minerals. So this is a first panel that was very interesting to set the foundations for the next proposal. So Amir, I want to give you the floor so that you can explain to us a bit more the second proposal, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is about regional cooperation. So Amir, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much for those very insightful comments and suggestions. There's a lot to ponder about and to add to the proposal. Some things may come back in the next pillars. So the second pillar is basically boosting regional collaboration to match supply and demand. Why? Because this is one of the points that Jeanette highlighted in CEPAL's work in the area and their findings is the lack of coordination between key actors and the need for the role of the state to create that coordination, that matching. So the objective of the proposals in this pillar is first is to address those coordination failures in the matching of suppliers and their development across the critical minerals supply chain, is to also share the procurement needs across the region, right? Share information regarding those needs from the upstream sector to the downstream sector in regards to critical minerals. To attract investments, that's one point that was mentioned several times. My conviction is that if the objective and if there is the development of a very strong regional efficient regional supply chain, this will be a lot more easier to attract investment in the sector, as one of the conditions for competitiveness, because investors could just plug into the existing supply chain, right, and rely on existing suppliers and so on. And those suppliers would actually gain in productivity because they can have access to larger economies of scale. And the last one is to connect businesses throughout the critical mineral supply chain. So to achieve those objectives, there are two projects that we would like to propose. The first one is a regional knowledge platform to share procurement needs. So throughout the critical minerals supply chain. So from the mining activity, so procurement needs in terms of what is needed in the upstream, in terms of mining goods, equipment and services, up until downstream industries, right? So an electric car factory, right, would share its procurement needs, and suppliers across the region could understand what are the needs, match their offer, and connect. The second suggestion is the organization of regional trade fairs focused on critical minerals and related products and value chains to attract investments and connect businesses, a kind of B2B, business to business platform. And this trade fair could be organized alongside existing trade fairs or in the annual CAMMA meeting, something along those lines. So this is the bulk of the second proposal, second pillar. And Carolina, the floor is back to you.
Gracias, Amir. Entonces, esta propuesta se
Thanks, Amir. So this proposal refers to cooperation or regional cooperation and coordination. There are two specific proposals. One of them is the creation of a regional platform and using the mining fairs to identify those opportunities for supply of critical minerals. So I would ask Marina to show the poll. So the next question is, what should be the priorities for investment projects in order to add value to critical minerals in the region? So the first one is if priorities should be in renewable energies, renewable or wind energy. The second one is in consumption, electronics, computers, smartphones, cell phones, and else. And the third one is energetically efficient vehicles, electric cars, and electric mobility devices. And the last one is the suppliers industry, mining equipment, mining services. So I want to give you a few seconds so that you can answer this poll. And again, I'd like to remind you that we have our question open in the Q&A, in which we've had very interesting proposals.
Voy a compartir con 90.
Okay, I'm going to share already with 90%.
Bueno, entonces
Perfect.
aquí ya estamos viendo los resultados.
Okay, so here we're seeing the results. And the main priority, according to our participants, is renewable energies with 44%, followed by suppliers industries. Mining equipment is 38%, 28%. And then electric vehicles, 21%. And those are the subjects that have been discussed the most in critical minerals. So we're going to give the floor again to our panelists. In this opportunity, I'm going to change the order of the answers. And I want to remind you all that we have 3 minutes so that we can all participate.
Con Cristian.
So in this opportunity, I'm going to start with Christian. Christian, in regards to the regional cooperation proposals, what are your reactions and also to the answers from our participants? Thanks, Carolina. I was saying the answers, and the first thing that came to my mind is a circular economy that I was mentioning in the presentation. I like to organize when I think on circular economy. The framework is a bit red, the one that has been used for emissions and climate change, 1, 2, and 3. And when I think on circular economy, I first think on that scope 1, which basically are suppliers, not only in power consumption, but all the procurement, let's say, everything that's purchased for the mining. Scope 2 will be internal processes of a mining and company. How do we make those processes more circular? And scope 3 are the outcomes, the product of the mining. How do we make it more circular? Why do you think it has to do? Because I come back to my original point. It has to have a proposal. The power of a mining sector in the next 10 years is going to go beyond the mining sector. Scope 1, what we see it in suppliers, really, if the mining sector starts to set circular policies for whatever is purchased, really a whole local industry can be generated. Localization of a lot of supplies are produced, and it has to do a lot with renewable energies. We can substitute a set of fuels with renewable energies through electrification, through green hydrogen, but it can also be what Caterpillar and Komatsu are doing a lot with, not selling the whole trucks, but to give maintenance, to provide maintenance processes, everything that has to do with waste, for instance. How do you transform waste into a value? How do you link those waste with the use of water and to broaden the mining process to a circular process involving a whole lot of other sectors? So that involvement, that connection generates a local employment, local investment, and that circular part is something very, very positive. And in scope 3, it has to do with iron. What's obvious is the production of the metal, of the steel, right? How do we attract that industry that now is generated in an in a carbon intensive industry as Korea and Japan? And one way is to attract it with a context, with a set of policies that allow it to give a competitiveness component. If we invest in green hydrogen at scale in places as Brazil, it's going to be very attractive to attracting green iron in Brazil. So it's not a favor anymore, but it's something that brings an extremely valuable process. And to export steel to China is something that we always do. Exporting green hydrogen, we don't do it. So if we're thinking circular economy that way, we see how it starts to connect with other parts of the economy and society, and how the mining sector really is a development engine that goes beyond the mining sector per se. So I just want to leave it like that.
Muy importante que es
Thanks,
el
Christian. Something very important, which is a circular economy and the relationship that Jeanette touched upon in her previous intervention. In that circular economy with the local part, how do we take advantage of that opportunity that's in front of us, of those critical minerals and its effect in the local economies through this circular economy vision? So I would like to give the floor precisely to Janet so that she can talk to us about the answers of our participants.
muy interesante
And
conocer
obviously from the LACC is very important to know your vision, your view on how regional cooperation is achieved in order to advance in this agenda. Yes, thank you very much.
Respecto a las prioridades
In regards to priorities established by participants in terms of priorities of investment projects, I thought all of the ones that have been mentioned are relevant in regards to renewable energy, in regards to circular economy that was mentioned a moment ago. And I thought it was also very important that we could invest in downstream in regards to uh, manufacturing of products of copper and other metals with this green or sustainable criteria, as however you would like to call it, the production of refined products, uh, battery degrees and active materials or reactive materials, cells that have to be complemented with investment also in the domestic innovation systems, which coordinate the government and universities and enterprises. In this, Chile has a broad experience, but it is necessary to scale it to, and certain regional agreements are needed in this field in order to have better chances or better opportunities to develop with the great technological gap that we have. We also need coordination mechanisms, as what it was said at the beginning, in terms of a vision that goes beyond the strict mining sector, and also policies should go beyond not only mining policies, but it is necessary to coordinate with the industrial policies, with innovation and technology, environmental policy, and at a social level, at a level of a specific territories, and in strategic value chains, for instance, renewable energies, storage systems, electrical mobility, and in general to have appropriate incentives to develop the value chain, which is strategic, and the markets of suppliers as well as consumers, which are necessary. It was mentioned also that in the regional arena, to create agreements, I think it's interesting what Amir proposed about this regional platform for the exchange of knowledge, but I also think it would be necessary to have possibilities of coordinating, especially in what has to do with knowledge and technology and infrastructure, right? Refining, um, suppliers development, technology and monitoring, and the efficient use of water and power, which communities claim so much, the development of mining clusters, and especially to avoid the production of a race to the bottom. It's important to have a coordination between producing countries in the region. It'll also be interesting to have technology platforms and of essential infrastructure on the foundations of the supply chain and strategic value as it is renewable energies that have been mentioned by the colleagues already. And it's a very appropriate time to articulate the electrical mobility policies of cities that are already happening spontaneously, as what I've said at a municipality level, already with the automotive industry at a regional level, and with the production of minerals, which is required. So I think it's a set of opportunities that if we can put them in a platform or in coordination spaces that are appropriate, I think they could be fruitful and hopefully it's so. Thank you.
Muy importante sobre
Thanks,
la
Janet.
coordinación.
You're touching about an important point in regards to coordination, not only focused in supplying, but a broader regional coordination, especially you emphasize a lot in technology and exchange of good practices and what has to do with sustainability and good refining standards and else. So a coordination way beyond just supplying or supply chain. So by this, I want to give the floor to Fernando, who in his previous intervention mentioned about regional public goods. Like, how do you see that, or what are your reactions to these um, platforms for regional initiatives in regards to, or in order to advance in this part? Effectively, Carolina, thanks a lot again. Probably I've gotten ahead a bit, but effectively, and I was answering it in the previous question in regards to the generation of these kinds of platforms is a total yes. We need to assess, of course, the suitability of each of them, but just go into a simple test, of course, yes, and of different kinds, not only platforms for exchanging of or sharing opportunities, as it was mentioned by Janet, but also all kinds of platforms that have themselves feedback among themselves. That the regional platforms tells us what the ecosystem needs and what's being required, and that it can be shared in these kinds of platforms and in these kinds of procurement, so to speak, and to share procurement needs, and likewise to also work platforms, as it was mentioned by Janet, also to share um, knowledge and capabilities. We're working in Alta Corporation here in Chile around that, and that some of them are already we're developing them in coordination with the Peruvian ecosystem. We work in matchmaking activities, and we hope that this link between Chilean, Peruvian, and American suppliers in general can become a habit. But I want to stop also in the question as such, because I considered it was very interesting not only the downstream developments, but also the upstream development. And I think this upstream development that was also mentioned by Amir in brief terms is important for two reasons. The first one is because when we talk about productive concatenation, the economic productivity and the progress towards a development in the as economy, we used to think in downstream, but literature is demonstrating that, and there are great economists at a global level. One of them is Chilean Hidalgo, but also Harman, Barbasi, Trejo, Ardensen, demonstrate that the productive concatenations have the opportunity to add more value and at the same time more local value and more generation of economic complexity in the locality, in the region. It's those upstream, more those upstream. I'm saying this, but it doesn't mean that it is excluding. We need to explore the two paths and the front leaps, as what they talked about downstream. In Chile's happen, we can talk about nanotechnological devices based on copper for antibacterial um, products, and we worked on that with the we're working on the ecosystem in the development of a technological roadmap for the production of metallic lithium, which will be a technological leap. And recycling of batteries, the second path of batteries, and all of these processes associated to circular economy also highlights in a very interesting way. So that's a consideration of to take into account and to always have in mind the upstream development. And the second thing is because of what I was mentioned at the beginning, what Christian was mentioning, is because it's very relevant in regards to emission. We want to make all these developments in a sustainable way, and specifically, we as Alta Lake Corporation, we've been working in the analysis of a third scope or three scopes of Colombian, Peruvian, and Chilean mining third scope or scope 3 of mining, which many were thinking in a lesser impact, will be representing 30 to 40% of emissions, total emissions of mining, and they're associated to the value chain. So the coordination, it's not only upstream, not only downstream, but there is scope upstream in that coordination. So in all chain, upstream and downstream is specifically relevant for these two reasons.
Gracias, Fernando, por destacar este punto que es muy importante.
Thank you, Fernando, for highlighting this point. Not only the coordination of downstream, but upstream is important. You have mentioned understanding that sustainability in the whole chain of the environment is the whole goal. Let me give the final floor to Anna Elizabeth to understand her focus. I would like to say some word in the purpose of defending the regulatory framework and the state of law. In this platform of work, we should be incorporating this dimension within the sustainability agenda and the innovation. We have to start thinking in the role of the legal frameworks and the institutions of, along with CAMMA, to promote traceability, circular economy, better standards, better technologies in the extraction processes. One of the things we have to think about the most is focused on the traditional topics in the mining agendas and how all these new initiatives and the whole international agenda questions these legal traditional frameworks. And I would also like to make a comment regarding the type of investments for these sustainable projects. Since one of the proposals on behalf of Amir is the need of attracting investments, and we have spoken about the thoughts of sustainable investments, which might be related to innovating and thinking in innovative solutions that might solve ever-present issues within the mining processes, thinking in the challenges, in the making progress of the value chain, in refination plants or refining plants, in the recovery of minerals, which is very important due to the valuable contents of these critical materials. I think it's important for us to start thinking in the role of law and regulation in incentivizing these innovations, to incorporate these topics in the national agendas. Let's make a twist in the logics of competition, which is the traditional competition between tributary and legal frameworks. Instead, we should think of a cooperation agenda, which requires another type of institutionality, which implies orchestration on behalf of the state through the mining ministries, a different role for each one of these agencies in this new reality, and thinking how to articulate the municipality and regional, the local government role within these new agendas. As Christian was saying, they have a great role in circular economy. All these transformation issues, we have to think in the local dimension, which is what we're lacking and what society claims for, that sustainability. Thank you, Anne Elizabeth. You're touching on a point which is very important in these agendas, the role of institutions and how we have to rethink not only the agendas in taking advantage of critical minerals, but also how to articulate at different local and national levels within authorities, and how to focus on innovation, a critical topic in this area. I will give the floor to Amir for the third proposal.
Thanks for your excellent comments once more. I will be addressing directly some of those comments through the third pillar, and looking forward to hear your comments on that. So the third pillar is about boosting new productive capabilities and boosting R&D. And the key objectives are some that you already mentioned in terms of what needs to be included in this regional agenda. So the first one is to acquire new productive capabilities that might not be existing yet in order to upgrade in critical mineral supply chains, given the data that Janet already showed, showing that most of the countries in the region are stuck in low value-added segments of the value chain. The objective is also so that local providers local suppliers get to engage with intermediary actors and different types of stakeholders and understand what are the procurement needs so that they can match their skills to the quality, time, and product requirement. The third one, so kind of the idea is to boost kind of intra-industry linkages and dialogue. The third point is to develop regional manufacturing capacity, which will clearly require the use of industrial policies. And lastly, to leverage national experiences for the development of regional projects. So in terms of key projects that are proposed, the first one is, so we would want the ministries to coordinate amongst themselves so that basically national capacity building is coordinated with the needs for regionalization of supply chains. And I mentioned, I'm going back to a few points that were said in the last session in terms of public goods, but also some of the key technological trends like green hydrogen. And these are excellent points. But even when you think of public goods, the interesting point to show is that this is not only national public goods, right? But such an ambitious regional agenda will require considerable intra-country infrastructure, which will require that these countries coordinate amongst one another. Otherwise, the potential will not be reached. And even in terms of specific technologies like green hydrogen, what seems interesting is that, I mean, this fits very well in terms of the vision of how the mining sector could be integrated, right, in the region's energy transition and into the global kind of carbon pledges. However, coordination will be essential because not all countries in the region can be a hub for green hydrogen production, right? So in a way, in order to foster, instead of basically in order to avoid duplication of efforts, right, production of the same goods, and they can be actually an emphasis on focusing on complementarities, right? If processing is done somewhere, green hydrogen is produced somewhere, and they can be an efficient and synergistic regional industrial ecosystem. The second, so one of the key concrete project that is proposed is the idea of regional clinics, right, or kind of study tours to share best practices. And for example, one that was mentioned by several of you is the sustainable extraction methods, right? So some countries in the region might be more advanced than others in terms of how to extract sustainably. Some governments are putting a lot of efforts into this, and these kind of experience can be shared amongst the region. So local suppliers can also be put in touch with intermediate actors in order to also understand procurement needs. I'm thinking specifically of the small-scale producers that might not have yet the experience in terms of extracting their resources and could really benefit from the experience of other countries in the region, particularly Chile, Peru, Canada, and as such. The third idea, I think this was proposed by some of you, is basically have a regional collaboration when it comes to R&D in order to build competitive advantage in particular sectors. And they are existing, as some of you mentioned, there are existing higher education institutes, research laboratories, and other private institutes that are investing, right, or doing research in areas related to critical minerals or, you know, minerals of the future and sustainable materials. So the idea is to link them together through a sort of regional network and coordinate that research, right? Identify priorities, foster collaboration, and so on. And the third one is regional alliances, focusing on private firms in the private sector, both for local suppliers and downstream actors. And the idea and the objective would be to develop regional manufacturing capacity. And there has been similar initiatives around the globe, such as the European Battery Alliance, which is actually pushed by the European Union, and it brought together different actors, right, around electric batteries, including researchers, academic institutions, private actors, and governments coming together in order to fulfill the vision of, you know, the EU becoming basically at the frontier of electric battery production. So perhaps inspiration could be taken from similar initiatives. So far, those are proposed separately, but I take the comment some of you voiced in terms of what about a platform that brings all of it together, not just sharing procurement needs, but also, you know, that regional innovation network and the alliance between the private sector. So potentially this could be all together or separate. I'd be really keen to hear your comments. Thank you very much. Carolina, back to you.
Thank you, Amir. This proposal is then focused in the development and new capabilities. There are 4 very important proposals: how to coordinate the national interregional capability, avoiding duplication of efforts, focusing on complementarities, making unions of different practice, knowing that there are different levels of expertise in the mining sector, the initiatives of investigation and development, inter-regional and international alliances, as it has been done otherwhere in the world. Let's launch your last poll. The question is, do you think creating a regional platform to share procurement needs can help match supply and demand? Perfect. This, with less options, gives us a consensus in creating regional platforms in sharing the needs for acquisitions. There is a possibility of sharing more topics, more than the procurement only. Continuing with our panel, in this occasion, we will start with Jeanette. Let's talk about research and development, what we have been talking about in your previous sharing. Yes, I share. Thank you for all the initiatives, Amir, precisely in the direction, in the joining of capabilities in technologic development, as well as investigation, research and development, and sharing the good practices. I think fostering the alliances among private providers, suppliers, as well as with the public companies on behalf of the different states, I think it goes along with what I had made comments about. I think that these articulation spaces should focus on the articulation in policies, long-term policies, not only in the provision or procurement of minerals, but also in the policies of electromobility within the cities, along with the automotive industry. That can be an example of what we can do in terms of thinking what the different countries can do and complement the initiatives in long-term agreements. For this, we would need some coordination spaces, which should be deeper. I know it's difficult in our region since we haven't been able to have agreements like in the case of the European Union, but we have experiences in a sub-regional level. It would be very important among economies which produce minerals and those which have the capability in the automotive development, that they can join with the commitment on behalf of governments and states to push in the same direction, having synergies in the different initiatives and joining the different markets and scales required for this to work. I have insisted a lot in research, science and development and technology, but that's not enough. We have to coordinate both offer as demand around minerals, technologies, and the different usages critical minerals could have. I think that is important, but I support what Amir has said. These are very relevant initiatives, and obviously they have been done. And everything that the participants have mentioned, it is key to support the exchanges in research and technologic development, supporting the potential development in the critical mineral production in a more sustainable way within the region. A concrete proposal regarding alliances, regional alliances, Jeanette does, is around the mobility and automation, which is critical to the electrical transition, where critical minerals are a key piece. What are your reactions regarding capabilities, Fernando? Thank you, Carolina. I think in particular, this part of the proposal is very strong, very solid. I have very little to add. I totally agree. And answering to the question they make, I am with the 90% which said yes. In our corporation high law, we are developing the public goods platform, both with impact for national as international impacts. We stand there. We declare ourselves available to co-execute this initiative. Because before anything, us as a Chilean ecosystem, we want to highlight something. And I want to insist in this: collaborating, co-executing, co-designing, because I don't have I don't have the roles which are not internationally approved. We have to work with neutral, idoneous organizations. We, as honest brokers in high law, we want to perform within these innovation technology ecosystem in Chile, but that allows us to work in Chile, but not in Peru, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Peru, since there might be actors which might be dissidents, and we don't want to be one. IGF-IDB-CAMMA is important for these international platforms and coordination to become a reality, since you are the ones who can work as necessary honest brokers as for this to become a reality, coordinating it in the correct way, so there is no hindrance in the development. Thank you, Fernando. Very important vision in collaboration, not only collaboration, but co-design, but also the development in a neutrality environment. Hopefully, high law in Chile will keep on working in these matters. And Elizabeth, what do you think in the new development of capabilities? I think it's important, the proposal, the need to acquire capabilities in the generation of surroundings and government and collaboration environments. These are capabilities which have to be learned when they are applied into this sector. And I would like to stop. I think it's very interesting, the regional clinic proposal, along with the emphasis of promoting sustainability as a factor of competitiveness. I think there's a role within these clinics within these platforms of collaboration about articulating the institutions with the regulations. Sometimes we see responsible procurement with international standards, but they do not articulate with the regulatory frameworks within the regions. So that is a great advantage within the region with production, mineral stakeholders which can anchor these initiatives within the regulatory frameworks. I think that's why it's important there are big challenges within the region still in different levels regarding the improvement of regulations within the sector. So articulating it with this objective, I think it's important in eventually in the development of regional clinics. Thank you, Anne Elizabeth. A very relevant topic, which is the regulations and how initiatives should not only stay in intentions, but as in many cases we have seen, we have to land them down on what we need for this agenda. Christian, something you might need or want to complement about this proposal? Yes, thank you, Carolina. It's fascinating to hear all the panel members and all the comments in the chat. I just wanted to go back to a series of comments which have a lot of basis standing on the shoes of the investors and politicians, as well of the NGOs, making what's basic there in the mining sector, all the infrastructure that's around, all the social help that implies the mining sector. That's a big proposal. I think it's important when we go back to the first question, that roadmap. I think it's important to have a vision, but still we need to understand we have to work in certain basic issues. The other topic we were talking about, when we're talking about development and innovation, in my time working in the private sector, one of the things we have learned and that we need in this agenda is the social license of investment. The more I see the mining sector, we talk about the agenda of innovation. How do we solve the automated, more digital agendas, but at the same time, a stronger social agenda? Not in social assistance as we have had it, or donations. It has to be a comprehensive offer of quality of living. And the more I think of this topic in research and development, we think of robots working. And there, I think there is an innovation agenda which the mining sector in the private sense is taking very strongly and seriously. There is a area of cooperation with civilian society on how to develop this social contract in a mining sector, which is more digitalized and automated. And how do we make this offer to increase the competitiveness on behalf of the sector? And that doesn't translate to longer processes, more costs, but work of more quality. And I go back to this same topic. Probably the mining sector cannot do it alone. We need a whole agenda in the government. So that's why all the other industries which might use and facilitate the mining sector of a higher quality, and how all these other industries can in some way generate employment, helping out the mining sector to become more competitive and automated, and that in Latin America, it becomes a complete package. And just to finish up, when I think of a fair transition, something spoken internationally, how can we think of an energetic position without thinking the political and social impact in Latin America? Actually, it should be within the heart of all our conversations. If it's not a fair transition, the transition is not going to come up in Latin America. How can we present all this transformation of development and investigation as a fair transition which gives employment and a higher quality of living? That is something We have to do it. The private sector is doing it very well, but that cooperation Jeanette and Fernando are mentioning also has to take these political and social topics in the transformation.
Thanks, Christian. You just added more topics to this research and development agenda, which are essential on how to overcome the possible tension between automation that research and development generates and the social impact, and how to innovate so that this transition to which mining is contributing to adjust itself and generate employment. And I think, as you said, there is a lot of interesting experience from the private sector, which is worth knowing and incorporating in this agenda of regional cooperation to advance in critical minerals. Okay, by this, Amir, we'll go to the last proposal.
Thank you very much again for the round of comments. Already really want to discuss some of those further with you in terms of how we can integrate those comments back, and hopefully we'll have maybe some time at the end for that. But yeah, now is the last pillar of the policy proposal, which is about data, right? How to generate information that can already feed and contribute to informing the projects that were discussed in the first three pillars. So the main objective is to gather more information, more knowledge that can help us understand the critical mineral landscape in the Americas. In our initial engagements with some of the actors in the region and some of the geological survey organizations, it seems that the first challenge is actually knowing what is in the ground, right, in each country. And there's a lot of gaps in that regard. And this is key for understanding where are the potentials down the line. So yeah, then that can help identify what should be the priorities in terms of regional investment projects and so on. So what we propose is that first the governments would agree to allocate resources to complete existing geological surveys in their own country and share the findings with the rest of the region. And that can really help understanding what is the weight of the region globally, what are the key minerals that are mostly there, and how to combine them in a way that create jobs and value, as you mentioned. The second key point is to support a study that will develop a methodology to identify critical minerals at the regional level. So in the first forum that we had a couple of weeks ago, the main concern was what are critical minerals, how do we define them, what are the discrepancies in terms of the definition across countries, and it would be very important to get together and get a common understanding of what they are, what they mean. And the issue here is that they may mean something differently if it's the local, national, or regional level. So the idea here is to get a regional understanding of what they are, so we can promote regional projects. The third study to support would be an opportunity assessment to identify what should be the key, the priority investment projects based on the existing strengths and weaknesses. And lastly, on the long term, it would be to support studies regarding the opportunities to develop particular regional supply chains for specific technologies or critical minerals. So similarly to what CEPAL has already started to do with lithium or copper, but applying this methodology or this assessment for other technologies like graphene, for example, or particular technologies like wind turbines and so on. One thing to mention before the discussion is the sequencing. Right. So today I presented all the four pillars, one after the other, but it's important to stress that they do overlap, and completing some of the pillars alongside one another will be important, especially when it comes to the fourth pillar about data generation, because this is a pillar that will also help to inform the roadmap, right, to develop critical minerals and their supply chains. So here is just, I took just a few of the proposed projects to show that, for example, in terms of data generation, the opportunity assessment or the preliminary mapping of critical minerals across the region based on already existing information, so just to share it amongst one another, would probably need to go alongside the development of the roadmap, right? To know where we are and where we can go. So as part of a proposal that will provide the ministers with, we'll need a kind of short-term, medium-term, and long-term view. And the one thing maybe that I'll just add here is from what you all said, something that seems to come out strongly is the fact that the roadmap will need to stress a lot more explicitly the socioeconomic benefits, right, in terms of jobs for local populations, and at the same time how it fits the global vision of a decarbonization in the region, which was not currently proposed, but I guess this is the way this can be improved further. So yeah, on that note, that'll be all for me. Thank you very much. For those who are present today, if you have further comments, or if tomorrow you're having breakfast and you think of further ideas you want to suggest, don't hesitate to share your thoughts to me and Marina. And Karina, back to you for the polls and further discussion. Thank you very much.
This last pillar is about the data generation and generation of information, is what Amir has highlighted at the end, is a pillar that also has to do with the sequencing of this policy, because part of a bit of understanding the critical minerals in the region starts from a definition of what those critical minerals are and the assessment of opportunities and supply chain studies to assess that potential. So Marina, I'd like to ask you to show the poll. And what the poll says is, do you believe all the region will benefit from the realization of the supply chains at a regional level in regards to critical minerals? And the possible answers are yes, all countries in the region must benefit from the regionalization, not realization, but regionalization of the supply chains. No, some countries will be negatively affected. And third is, most will benefit, but it will be difficult for small producing countries to integrate the regional supply chains. So a few seconds to answer this survey, this poll. Thanks, Marina. So here are the results of the poll. And really, the vast majority of you answered that there will be countries who may benefit, but smaller countries may not. And I suppose that's part of what we must discuss on how we can leverage this development for the most part of our countries in the region. So I'm going to start in this opportunity asking Fernando to talk to us a bit about his view in this agenda, more about information construction and consensus about information and your reaction to the results of the poll. It is very interesting, Carlina, the results of the poll, because we can notice that there is a concern, and it's a concern that we need to cover from the beginning. We need to encompass from the beginning, because we must have clear during the whole process that it is true that we want to collaborate in some aspects, but we're going to compete anyways. So in order for us to all benefit, each of the countries and each of the regions to benefit in this collaboration process, we must coordinate it in an appropriate way. We must consider from the first time that those differences, and to generate the appropriate governance that can consider those differences at all times. And in regards to that, there is an English concept which I haven't heard in Spanish, but we're going to try to translate it. It's called co-opetition or co-opetition, which responds to the joint of or unite in the words cooperate and compete, which actually applies for this process. I had the luck of working for the government in Los Angeles in the United States, which applied this model to its port, the most important port in the US economy, where 49% of imports come in to the United States. And what people do not know is that this port is two ports that are competing, like the Los Angeles City port with Long Beach City ports. And likewise, it could be transferred to intergovernmental aspects as the European Union. There are countries that compete in many ways, exports, um, sell of products, but they cooperate in many other things. And I believe that what helps as a common factor in these collaboration processes is that we need to be clear on what we collaborate. And in general, those are enabling aspects of the development of these matters or economic developments that we want to trigger, that we want to drive. So having that development process and collaboration process clear, I think we can take action under this co-opetition concepts and to benefit all of us, but no doubt we need to consider it constantly, specifically from the design and from the governance design point of view. Now, answering a bit to the proposal that Amir was showing, I think is very solid, very robust, and specifically, I think it is very important if we're going to try to promote a critical mineral supply chain, as what we've talked about during all this seminar, starting from the beginning, not to run before walking. And I think the scientific information and making available this information is essential. We had the chance 1 year ago to do a research, a benchmarking research in comparison of our Chilean situation with economies of similar economic and development levels in general as Peru and Mexico, and reference economies of Canada and Australia. And we saw that effectively it's true that we're advancing in a powerful way in that sense. We see that there are key differences in the investment and making available geoscientific information, in reference information or benchmarking information, and um, or benchmarking economies and developing economies. And that's a gap that it's important to cover, specifically in minerals that nowadays are not as developed as rare earths, um, as well that we have in Peru and Chile and in other countries. And we want to close that by mentioning a academic research study of mindset in 2017, which explained that for the Chilean case, but there's no doubt that this can be translated into all mining economies, that for each peso, each dollar invested in making available geoscientific information, it is estimated that the return to the state via taxes and other collection channels is $5 per $1. That means it's around business. We shouldn't even question it. So I think that's specifically the opportunity, the making geoscientific information available to develop these matters, these subject matters.
Importante
Thanks,
tu punto
Fernando.
el tema del
Your
retorno
point is very important in regards to
que
the
haces tú,
return
creo que
that
eso se da en la mayoría de
geoscientific
los
information has.
países,
That's something that's pending in many
no
countries,
puede
but
avanzar
no
el
doubt
tema de
we
minería
cannot
sin
advance in
eso.
all this
Y también
critical
el
minerals
punto de la
subject
innovación,
without that.
ver
And
la coordinación
also your point about the
y
challenges
esa
that coordinated
representación
and
también
competition will
la
bring in
importancia
countries in this
de una
agenda, and the
gobernanza
importance of having
clara
a very clear governance
garantice que se
that
beneficien
guarantees
todas las
that
partes.
all parties
En ese
are
sentido, ¿cómo
benefited
se analiza desde tu
from. In
perspectiva
that sense,
más
it's
jurídica
not
y
analyzed
también
from
como
more
profesional?
juridical, legal, and institutional insight. Maybe I can talk to I can ask Anna. I think data generation is important in having a deep legal diagnosis of a legal mapping of a situation and what the international and national or regional commitments are in regional blocks in terms of international trade, investments, in terms of environment and human rights. I think it has to be in the foundations of the cooperation architecture. So I think in this first initial phase, what I would include in this work pillar in data generation is the juridical, the legal diagnosis, because that's going to allow to work in the cooperation architecture and to also allow to understand eventual barriers. So that's my contribution in this block specifically.
Gracias, Ana Elizabeth.
Thanks, Anne
Desde
Elizabeth.
luego, tu visión
Your
es
vision
no solamente
is
del
is
tema
like to go beyond
geoscientífico
more
y que
to go
esa,
beyond the
esa
geoscientific
información
part,
también
and that
cobre
information
el
also
marco
covers
jurídico y la
the juridical,
normatividad
the legal
que
frame and
rige
the
el
regulatory
sector
frame
minero y
that's
las
governing all the
posibilidades de
mining
hacer
sector
trabajos
and the
coordinados.
possibilities
Eso
of
es parte
making
del diagnóstico que tú
supply
haces
chains is part of a
de
diagnosis that we need to make,
lado.
and it's not
No
we
sé
shouldn't leave it aside.
qué
And I don't know,
visión
Janet,
tienes al respecto.
what vision do you have about this?
Y bueno, gracias Carolina. Primero
Well, thank you,
coincidir con
Carolina.
la
First of all,
necesidad
I agree with the
de
need of
compartir información
sharing
veraz, me
information
parece muy
and data.
pertinente.
I think that's
Solamente
very
sin
appropriate.
embargo,
And
sería
however, I
interesante
believe it'll
incorporar
be interesting to
algunos datos,
incorporate
información sobre los temas
information
ambientales
about the
y
environmental
sociales, ¿no?
and
Dentro de las
social
conflictividades, por
issues to
ejemplo.
those data
Sería
about
útil
conflicts, for
para
instance.
todos
It'll be
y de
useful
ahí
for all of
hacia
us,
mirar
and
las
from there
prácticas
to see good practice in those dimensions. Now, in regards to the question of the poll, I agree with the answer. The benefits to make a more coordinated management in regards to value chains of minerals will be heterogeneous, and as is articulated more and more in industrial policy in the region in a more coordinated way, benefits could be spread in a better way, could be distributed in a better way. Of course, it depends on if a country has or not the availability of critical minerals. It depends on if it extracts them or not, and the quality and power that it has in the vertical and horizontal links this mining, in the capacity, as I said, to coordinate um, policies and in creating capabilities to generate value, to generate concatenations. And it will depend also in the transparency level of quality and independence that it has, and in the power of um, tax agencies and tax authorities. I think in the regional coordination with strategic value chains are a necessary condition, but it's not enough anyways. Cooperation also must monitor other issues that respond to sustainability. And many colleagues in the panel have already talked about this, right? That all pillars in the environmental dimension and the social dimension related to the mining activity and to industries that start to relate themselves. It's also clear that the greater benefits would be achieved by the higher scale mining productions. The SMEs or a more artisanal production has a lower productivity, has a lower access. So it'll be necessary to try to, at some point, generate state policies that could compensate that, that could set off that, and that support the productive capacities of these sectors. For instance, a good and interesting practice is the one of ENAMIC, which is this institution created to, or which actually purchases from small miners in Chile, and basically they're they're organized around copper, but it could be a good practice to be considered in general. So that way, I agree with what most answered. The results could be heterogeneous, but besides, we need to generate a set of policies and coordination initiatives so that benefits are distributed in a broader way, more in a more homogeneous way. Thanks, Janet. I'm left with two messages. One of them is about information, Amir, complementing and Elizabeth. It's not only the geoscientific and regulatory part, but Jeanette has also insisted in the importance of having environmental and social baselines because that's also going to impact in the supply chain. And second, to highlight, to stress the challenges, which is um, solving the heterogeneity in our countries. And one point that's important that Jeanette mentioned, which is the development of mining in different countries, because it's true that in our regions, there are many countries that have artisanal mining, and that's presenting as an opportunity. That's shown as an opportunity, but also as a challenge. So we'll wrap up with Christian in regards to your reactions for this proposal. All the conversation is outstanding. It's a luxury to be part of it. I was thinking a bit on data, on what happened in other industries that we can learn from. And data integrity and data credibility is something that should be at the upfront. There should be a clear regulatory frame, and really there have to be transparency platforms for data. Why am I raising this? Because from a private point of view, if we're going to have a more automated mining with a higher artificial intelligence, where engineers working in a mine are going to be the traditional mining engineers or more data engineers, this is going to touch the bottom of investment, the core of investment. The data generated in a highly digitized mining operation, in highly automated mining is huge. So having clarity on how much and how um, this data should be shared is important. I'm not saying that it should be made, but there has to be transparency from a regulatory point of view. If these regulations are very different at a regional level, I think it is going to generate problems for the region. So having a broad conversation in terms of how to make data to have a high integrity and to have a high transparency that's reflected in a regulatory frame which incentivizes the investment of high technology, but that also generates transparency for investors is important. And the other dimension that I want to leave is the opportunity. If LATAM starts to generate that credibility in the data aspect, and we start to see the value of traceability, if we have the benchmark of credibility and integrity, so the traceability becomes an essential tool, right? So if we're going to have great renewable energy investments for the mining sector, green hydrogen with very low carbon levels, which is already being made or done in the mining sector. But if this data is not credible and the markets do not recognize it and the financial markets are not taking it for their ESG screenings, the benefits of these advances are marginal. So if Latin America really generates this credibility in data generation, given a transformation in policies, and if it has the traceability component, which goes from the extraction up to the markets through a collaboration, all this data can travel to the markets and really open new markets. It can open higher volume in existing markets and to open access to capital in an exponential way. So data is not just geo referentiation, but it's crucial for for Latin America. Thanks, Christian. Three keywords that you put on the table in regards to this part of information, which is integrity and credibility of information as a baseline for encouraging traceability and trust of all stakeholders involved in this discussion. Well, I think we run out of time. We ran out of time from my end. I just want to thank for the opportunity to moderate this panel, which has been excellent, and from which we've learned a lot of things. Amir, I'm sure that you took note of a lot of proposals, and really from my end, I want to thank you for your participation, and I want to give the floor to Roberto, who's going to close or wrap up these events.
Creo que estás en mute, Roberto.
Roberto, I think you're on mute.
Gracias, Carolina. Realmente.
Thanks, Carolina. Really, it has been an event that fills us with satisfaction to all the organizers. I think from here, something that one day we were discussing with Martin, we were discussing on the need of analyzing and taking regional ministers' opinions from experts and that could contribute to a regional growth in regards to the taking advantage of the natural resources, of their natural resources. So I just want to, from now I want to let the participants know, and I want to thank you. We're going to take into account all the information that's in the chat and from the proposals that you made to our initial questions. And I also want to especially thank to you, Carolina, for your excellent moderation, to Amir for the organization of all this work that you showed us, that you showed us in the event, and to Jeanette for the participation, to Fernando and Elizabeth and Christian, and of course also to our work team, Marina, Isabel, Natasha, Carlos, Sucre, Martin, Walter, etc. So this event has also had the collaboration of the Latin American Agency of Mining or Mining Agency to disseminate this information. So thank you very much. And the CAMMA meeting, the 11th conference of the Americas Ministries of Mines of the Americas will be carried out by the end of December or by the end of September or during October. The date hasn't been established yet, but there also will be activities that we will inform you about, which is going to be very important to have your participation. So thank you, and we'll see each other again very soon. And thank you all.